Welcome back to Advocacy Alchemy with Professor Ross. Today we have a good one, guys. We're diving into a sobering case out of Tavares, Florida. A bodycam moment that shows how dangerous fentanyl exposure can be, even for trained officers. Here, the officer's using gloves, so that's important. And apparently she was cautious also. But we're not just watching the footage, we're going to break down what the law was back in 2022 when this incident happened and how it evolved since then, and what it all means going forward, both in the streets and in the courtroom. With that, let's jump right into the video.
Possible exposure.
Tavares police said they're releasing this difficult footage of an officer who is now doing okay as a warning about how dangerous fentanyl can be. Courtney Sullivan with the Tavares Police Department said Officer Courtney Banick found drugs on a passenger during a traffic stop Monday night.
She said she just barely opened it, saw that it was, narcotics, closed it quickly.
Sullivan said Banick wore gloves as she always did. The officers agreed to test the substance back at the department, trying to avoid exposure because it was windy.
Next thing you know, she was trying to key up on the radio, and you could hear in the radio traffic almost like she was choking.
3 just once, it sounded weird.
Sullivan said the officers found Banick in and out of consciousness. They got Banick out of the car and ran to get the emergency medication Narcan.
He's ODing, Narcan.
A small window to get to the hospital and to get the care that you need.
Get an ambulance.
You good.
You're good, Courtney. You're good.
She's breathing.
Hey, stay with me, okay?
The body camera footage shows Officer Banick reviving, even talking.
It's like a $1 bill.
Not long after, she's passed out again.
They administered a third Narcan.
Officer Banick survived.
Biggest thing that Officer Banick in general really wants others to take away from this, so that these drugs are dangerous. They're dangerous for not only yourself, but others surrounding you.
We're told the officer is at home recovering, and she believes the wind did contribute to her overdose. Police also say that the person involved will likely face felony charges, but they're still investigating. In Tavares, Anika Hope, West 2 News.
Okay, so the officers here intended to test the narcotics back at the station to avoid the windy conditions outside. But here the exposure to the drugs happened so fast that according to the news report, the woman, Officer Banick, could be heard over the radio choking and almost in some garbled tone, and within moments she was unconscious. Now, the report said that Officer Banick went in and out of consciousness, and we saw during the very short portion of the body cam we have that at one moment she was completely out on the ground, another moment she was in and out as she was sitting up on one of her partners. All this shook the department, and I believe this case went forward in helping change the laws. This all was a powerful warning about how dangerous fentanyl exposure can be, even without direct ingestion or injection into the body. Let's jump into the law and break it down. In 2022, when this incident occurred, Florida already had harsh penalties for fentanyl possession and trafficking of fentanyl. Now, the drug is classified as a Schedule II controlled substance, which means unauthorized possession is an automatic felony. If you have under 4 grams, that's a third-degree felony that carries up to 5 years in prison and a $5,000 fine. If you have 4 grams or more, it's automatically considered trafficking, triggering mandatory minimum sentences. Anything between 4 and 13 grams is an automatic 3 years in prison, a $50,000 fine. Anything from 14 grams to 28 grams is 15 years in prison, $100,000 fine. Everything over 28 grams is 25 years in prison, $500,000 for a fine. Now, in 2024, Florida lawmakers took things further with their Senate Bill 718. This new law introduced second-degree felonies for recklessly exposing a first responder to fentanyl. And what that meant is if it resulted in an overdose or a serious injury, anyone who's over the age of 18 who unlawfully possesses fentanyl and puts an officer, a firefighter, EMT worker, or corrections officer in danger, they can now face up to 15 years in prison for exposure alone. even before factoring in the possession or the trafficking charges. This law was signed into place in Florida. Next, let's move on to the evidentiary standards. They're still important even in possession cases. When talking about the evidentiary standards, remember there's 6 levels. The lowest level is mere suspicion. That's simply a gut feeling or intuition, like an officer noticing strange behavior or a suspicious container. This isn't enough for a search or an arrest, but it starts the chain. For example, officers deciding not to open the bag at the scene because of the wind, trusting that little feeling that something bad could happen. That would be a mere suspicion. Number 2, reasonable suspicion. All right, this requires specific facts to justify a brief investigative stop. All right, remember specific and articulable facts that criminal activity is afoot. The example is finding narcotics on a passenger during a lawful stop creates reasonable suspicion that a crime is being committed. Number 3, probable cause. All right, this requires having enough evidence to believe that a crime has occurred. All right, this is also what's needed for an arrest or to go obtain the search warrant. A good example is seeing and identifying what appears to be fentanyl gives probable cause for an arrest and testing of that contraband found. Number 4, preponderance of the evidence. All right, this is used mostly in civil cases, and it means that your claim is more likely than not to be true, meaning that you have at least 51% of the evidence pointing to your claim being true. An example would be if the department were sued civilly over safety procedures, this would be the standard of proof because it'd be a civil case. Next, you have clear and convincing evidence. All right, this is also used in many types of civil actions that require a little bit more proof. All right, this requires a firm belief or conviction. It's a higher standard than preponderance of the evidence, and it's used in things like professional discipline cases. Usually requires about 75% of the evidence pointing to a high likelihood of your claim being true. It's also used in fraud cases and things of that nature. Here, a good example would be if someone claimed negligence or misconduct within the department regarding officer safety protocols. This would be the relevant standard to be used. You would need to show more evidence to meet your burden of proof. Number 6, beyond a reasonable doubt. This standard is used for criminal convictions. This is the highest standard in the American justice system. To convict someone under this new law in Florida, prosecutors would have to prove that a person recklessly exposed the officer to fentanyl while possessing it unlawfully, and that it resulted in serious harm. Now here, this woman had to be revived with Narcan 3 times. All right, and this is all from just touching and smelling the drug. So it's very, very strong. This incident reminds us that the opioid crisis is not just a public health issue, it's a legal one. Florida laws have evolved to reflect the gravity of exposing others to fentanyl, especially first responders. So let me ask you a question. If you were on a jury and you heard that someone exposed an officer to fentanyl during a windy traffic stop, would you believe that it was reckless or was it accidental? Do you think this new law goes far enough to protect officers, or does it go too far and criminalize unintentional exposure? Remember, we always have that gut feeling that usually goes off when we're in an eerie situation. Officer Banick, she originally felt that something was off and tried to avoid testing this substance at the scene, but even that precaution wasn't enough. What does your gut tell you when you see someone handling a substance they know can kill on contact? Remember, this is Advocacy Alchemy. I am Professor Ross, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day, and stay safe out there. And please remember to like, subscribe, and share this video. With that, I'll see you tomorrow.